go ahead and
Right.
record.
Yeah, go ahead.
And then, right now we're just going to kind of talk about my format ideas, make sure everyone kind of agrees.
I like your format
and then
ideas.
I have nothing interesting to say.
I don't think that's true.
Let's see. Yeah, okay. I'm not sharing it. Share. Can't let there be dead air. Must mumble. Okay, so yeah, this is
my thing.
It's has. Oh, did I share the wrong screen? Yeah, I have you up though. I'm gonna talk about that.
Cool. Yeah, we can talk about it whenever you want.
Yeah. How do I share screen? Hopefully this won't happen during the recording, but I can edit screen too.
It's totally fine.
Okay. I thought that's what I did. Okay, so now you see the Corrupt Politicians Act thing?
Right.
Okay. So this is my thought. So first we show the initiating communication. I don't know what we're going to call that thing. And this time it's a tweet, but other times it could be a video segment or whatever it is. It could be interpretive dance for all I know. And then we kind of go around, and this is also the introduction phase. So you kind of say who you are, although another option is we can introduce the next person or have a real thing. Some people say never introduce yourself, always have someone else do it because it sounds more professional. I think that's true, but I also think it's good for people to hear your voice when you're introducing yourself so they identify with you. I don't know. So we can talk about that. But the idea is that there'd be an introduction by yourself and keep it really short. And then you'd kind of, and Steve, you may not want to do this, but give your impression of what you saw when you got the first tweets. And this is just like an emotional or a knee-jerk reaction or just something. So it's just a couple sentences about, or a sentence about that. And then later on we get to the observations. But what do y'all think about that introduction piece? Like, Steve, do you even want to give what your impression was? I know you don't like doing it.
No, I can do it. I have first impressions too. It's totally fine. No, I can do it too. I just, my approach is just gonna be different, but I think that's like a benefit or a positive, I'd say.
And then just to go.
Sorry, so is that only for tweets, or how would that work for like the Joe Rogan example?
Well,
where it's like a 10-second clip.
We'd probably show the 10-second clip.
Okay.
I kind of feel like the first response should be like your encounter with the controversy or whatever you first saw, even a headline maybe can spark you thinking, oh, this is completely wrong.
Yeah.
And then you're immediately like, you don't even get a chance to consider whether you should accept the invitation to the argument. You're in it when you're like, oh God, this guy, I think that's kind of what,
Yeah, I do like the idea of starting with a headline. So like with the Joe Rogan one, start with that, like, whatever headline it is. Joe Rogan eats a baby on live web stream, or however they choose to sensationalize it. And then, actually show the underlying clips and responses, and that can be one of the things. How accurate was that headline to what actually happened?
Can we do that one next week? Joe Rogan eats a baby live on podcast.
Let's just do a completely fictional. Although I could Photoshop that in.
Yeah. See if we can go 4chan and start a fake news story.
Right.
Welcome to Propaganda Cast.
Right. So it'd be a quick first impression, and it would just be the initial utterance or whatever it is, and it wouldn't be any of the responses or the debate. It would just be kind of what did you think when you first were exposed to this media? It's a 10-second clip, I think, is fine. And I guess we would probably show it so to make sure that the audience has a context. And then, so the next section would be, once each of us kind of introduce ourselves and give our first impression of that, then we just kind of rotate through, and each time it comes around to you, you would pick one observation. So try and make several, or you could reply to an observation of someone else, and then we just keep going until people run out of content. And the idea is to kind of like do it like an opinion show where you're kind of going back and forth between people. Now, this is where I think, Steve, that you would go ahead and show some slides like this.
Yeah.
Yep. And I'm okay, even if it's like, I mean, I say keep them short, but if you want to give enough context so that they know what these new terms are that they're learning and where it kind of came from. So you could either do both these slides in one, because I guess it doesn't make sense unless you draw it to the example.
Yeah.
So not like 3 minutes, but
Now I can keep it short because I could do one slide very quickly and then do the next slide my second time around.
Yeah.
As kind of a framing device.
If that makes sense. Now, if you just like talk about this, but you don't draw it back to it, I think that'd be confusing. So so if you need to do that, I'm fine with saying, this is what or even starting here and saying, well, no, I guess you have to say here. Yeah. So this is the thing. And you notice this in the tweet, and maybe you could just do you could also maybe just talk about one of them.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about doing, actually, was just going down each one, because I also have the speech kind of highlighted in a way to kind of indicate what I mean. Yeah. With just a couple of highlighted examples that I can show on the screen. And I'll probably just do one of those because they can get kind of long for what we're trying to do anyway. I mean, it's kind of a short speech, this is like, I'll talk about it in the show about Senate floor speeches, but it's not like they're it's not like they're debating before a vote where the speeches can really go kind of crazy long.
Right. And one thought, and I don't know how good this is that I really would like to keep it focused on, like, you're actually going into the content of the speech, which I guess what I was thinking about focusing on is more just one sentence, and maybe not even the video itself, but just like in that first reaction, I'd almost like to react on the tweet text rather than the content itself in the first round. So I don't know if this applies to the text or if that's only content.
Well, I wouldn't have, if I hadn't watched that video clip, I wouldn't have come up with any of this.
Okay. Yeah. So so in this case, we'd probably, and this is all in the clip itself, or some of this also from.
This is also in the other parts of it. So the clip is his thesis, and then he gives us 3 different ways that is true. But he's not, the spoiler is he's not arguing that the bill is bad. He's arguing that Republican values are good, which is a nice flip if you really think about how clever it is what he's doing. He's not saying disagree with this bill, because that's not the issue. The issue is this is epidictic. We're celebrating a victory. This is a speech of we won the war. So it's like, why are we so good? Why did we deserve to win? And so it's kind of a clever, because if you respond to it and say the bill is bad, he's like, that's not what I'm talking about.
That'll be really interesting to talk about how other people did it. Now that's the speech. Does the tweet?
Well, the tweet is, I would say the tweet's the thesis of the whole thing. I mean,
okay. So it's related enough.
That long. It's not that long. It's related enough, but it made me think, like, what is this? Because he's not referring to it by its proper name. He's doing some crazy high school debate techniques, which is what Ted Cruz is known for as a moderately bad Princeton University debater. So yeah, we can start. I mean, I'm happy to adapt to whatever you think will work, and I also feel like it'll change too. So I don't have a lot of strong feelings about saying yes or no to different things. I really want to try some of these things out and just see if it makes a coherent, interesting show.
Yeah. I don't want to leave it open to experimentation forever. Yeah. So that's
why we get along so well.
Yeah. Everything's an experiment.
Right.
Never actually do anything. We just think about it.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, so yeah, you can take over the share when you're ready to share this.
Okay, sure.
Give it back. So do you think that in that first thing, we should go ahead and play the clip, or to keep the intro short, just kind of say, this is the quote, mention the clip. And then when you could talk about your first reaction to the tweet itself and when you watch the video clip. And then when we do the rounds, you can go into more detail.
Sure. I mean, I think it's fine because this is how, like, in natural argument, like, and not in like staged argument. I don't know if that's a
Mhm.
valuable distinction. I just kind of came up with it. This is how we get involved in public argument, as we see something like that and we have a reaction to it. And so the way I thought about it was modeling where I would go as kind of as a kind of professional,
Mhm.
where I would go with it. And it
Yeah.
took me a while. This isn't what I instantly came up with. It took me a while to think about it, what he was up to.
Awesome.
So I can talk about that.
And then I was thinking, now this could be, I added this in a little later. This could be done in the observation section, but just kind of proposing different ways that Ted Cruz could have done the speech, which is exactly what you were saying, Steve.
Mhm.
Better ways for him to do the speech, or that tweet itself. Just things that we would suggest in improvements. And those improvements, of course, will depend on what you're trying to, what you think he should have expressed and to whom he should have expressed. Because he's, like you said, this is a celebration. He's really expressing it to his, I was going to say constituents, but it's really his base, right?
Mhm.
And maybe moderates. So yeah, so any ways we could talk about the different ways you could have said it. And I say better, but it doesn't have to be. It's like, well, he could have chosen a different audience for this and used this opportunity to do this, right? So just whatever we want to say about that.
Yeah, that's great. I love that.
And then if we still have time, because I don't know how long that's going to take, then we could go through the responses either in the tweet or fact checks of it, or just any public response that we want to bring up. I also made it to where when I'm looking at the tweet here, I can pull up the responses, the replies to the tweet by hovering over.
Oh, this is so cool.
So this is the
so
top
cool.
tweet.
I love this.
And I got some ideas to try and improve it, because it'd be nice to see the threads. Twitter doesn't show you the threading very well. So it'd be nice to change the interface to where you can say, and then this person replied to that person, and then this person replied to that person. Although, come to think of it, I have some prepared tweets. So where did I made a thread. So this is the actual tweet and all the responses. You can see they're kind of hard to see until I hover over them. They're all grayed out. But there's another one.
This tool, but this is kind of an aside, but this tool is just so useful for doing that head in the box OBS corner YouTube video when you're trying to critique somebody. It's just such a useful thing.
Yeah, I'll probably.
You're gonna make a lot of money off of it. That's what I'm trying to say.
I was gonna share it open source, so maybe I should start selling it.
I think you should have a subscription and get like somebody like DeMarco or somebody like to use it, because they're always looking for tools like that. Phil DeFranco, that's the guy's name. Philip DeFranco, the news guy. Yeah,
remind me of that a little later on.
Yeah,
I don't forget.
I don't even know if he's still relevant. I'm just dating myself here.
Okay, so here's the collection of tweets. So what I did is I made a Twitter has a, I can't remember what they call it, but you can just put the tweets that you want to talk about in it. And
I like that one. No, it won't.
Yeah, although she did post something, but
yeah, it's funny.
It's like, nope,
no, it won't.
Not. So yeah. So, and then I'm trying to make these. I don't know if I'm gonna keep doing this because I'm playing with making it full screen. It still has a little bar across the top.
Right.
But and then now I'm realizing I don't think I can toggle between them very easily. Yeah, I can. But I'll probably use.
Is the bar still there if you hit F11?
Well, no, but oh, that's weird that reappeared. I hid that. What's the hotkey to refresh? Oh, reload.
I think it's F7. I don't know.
F5 or F5 through a force refresh.
Yeah, so Yeah, the thing is, I wanted to be able to quickly toggle between them, and it's a. I mean, I can. Anyway, so yeah, we'll play with that. We'll improve it as we go. Back to. Yeah, and then we could look at the responses and adjust as many as we want. That person that posted, no, it won't, and then the fact check. And then I thought about this last section, which I don't know if we do it, but just winning one round of each of us, rephrasing the original expression, choosing our favorite response, or around creating our own kind of winning response. So we could say, so any of that. I don't know how much time to save for that, so we'll just play around with that. Do y'all want to give that a try?
Sure, yeah, sounds good to me.
And then we'll also other news and events, and we can each kind of plug our own item or talk about an event going on, just anything that's in the space of this kind of public deliberation, public discussion, argumentation stuff. And I haven't really figured out the intro and the outro. I meant to have it kind of written down so I could read it out. But what I might do is when I edit this together is I might just record myself doing a little intro and outro. So we might just kind of dive into it.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of various options. Yeah. And after they go out in public, people's response will tell us a lot.
Yeah, I got several people I was talking to last night. And they're like, "Oh, send me a link to your podcast." I said, "Well, I really don't have a link yet."
Oh no,
they weren't the type of people I wouldn't want to show them our first couple videos. They're not the type, but because they'd be like, "Oh, they never watched again." Okay, cool. So, yeah, I don't know. Oh, I'll restart my camera. All right, so I guess I'll do a quick intro and then I'll call on, probably just go to Steve to do the intro. And then Steve, whenever you're kind of done, would you just throw it on to Adriel?
Sure, no problem.
Cool. All right, so welcome to episode 1 of our podcast. The topic we're going to cover today is this tweet by Senator Ted Cruz, where he says, Democrats' Corrupt Politician Act was designed to register millions of illegal aliens and convicted felons to vote, which would have diluted and stolen votes from legal American citizens. Steve, what did you think when you first saw that?
Well, thanks for having me on and having me do this. Whenever I see Ted Cruz speaking, I immediately think this is false. That's where I'm coming from. So I had to go dig a little deeper because that initial reaction for me isn't good enough as a rhetorician. So I got to look and see, okay, what's he doing? What kind of magic, what kind of alchemy is he up to here? Because the other thing about Ted Cruz that we know is that he's a very smart person. So what he's saying here in the tweet and what he's clipped here from his Senate speech might not be the whole story. And I feel like this delusion is meant to bait people into responding a certain way. This is my initial response. So then I very quickly went to Congressional Record, looked at the entire speech, thought about it for a couple of days, and then said, okay, this is what I think might be happening. So I think he's maybe, I'll just tease what I'm going to say next by saying I don't think he's arguing against this bill. I think he's arguing for something else. And I'll just leave it at that and kick it over to Adriel.
Thanks, Steve. I mean, whenever I see a headline like this, all I can do is sort of help rephrase it in my mind to politician agrees with own party and disagrees with opposing party. Breaking news. I'm 100% certain that if it was the exact same bill word for word that the Republicans had submit, the Democrats would be giving the exact same speech. So I think if we're coming down to what the actual post means, I think that's where it would help to have some tools to say, whenever you see a post like this, to break down, okay, on first read, what do most people think this is actually saying? And then having a point by point breakdown, okay, if it was designed to register, not just maybe it would occasionally do it. You're saying it was written from scratch with that being the main purpose. Okay, that's one point. And then, okay, to register illegal aliens as another point, to register convicted felons. And then as people start to have conversations about, well, could you register an illegal alien to vote? Could you register a convicted felon? Was it designed to? You can start to pick apart what, which parts are actually verifiably true and which parts are verifiably false.
Yeah, so that we'll go into more detail into that in a bit. And my first reaction to it was lying Ted was what I was thinking. But it was interesting because I had to dig a little deeper going into this, and I realized that I was completely wrong. So that was eye-opening, and we'll talk about that in a second. I forgot to ask us to do intros. So starting with Steve, tell us your title, name, how would you like the audience to know you?
Yeah, hi, I'm Dr. Steve Yano. I'm a professor of rhetoric at St. John's University in New York City, and I primarily teach public speaking, oratory, argument, and debate. And you can read my stuff at sophisticsteve.substack.com.
And we'll have links in the comments. Adriel?
Sure, thanks, Bentley. So I am Adriel Briscoe. I got involved with this through a session that I'm doing with Bentley for Together Tech for Game B. And I guess I'm mostly involved because of my project Conferati and WikiLection, which are sort of sense-making projects to help combat misinformation.
Great. And I'm Bentley Davis, founder of GoalieBot, a project to experiment with improving public discourse and reducing misinformation. So we'll see how that goes. Awesome. So who wants to? We can either keep rotating around from Steve to Adriel to me, or so I guess we do that. Steve, are there some observations you made about this after you dug a little deeper into this tweet?
Yes, yes, there are. I'm going to share. Now is the time when I should share?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I'm going to share.
See if you can just throw me off.
Let's see, I'm going to share. I made a couple of slides just for clarity here. There we go. I hope everyone can see that.
Yep.
Okay, so a couple of observations is the first, I thought of this speech as epideictic argument. And what I mean by that is there are three traditional modes of speech or rhetoric that Aristotle came up with, and they're still with us. I mean, they might be outdated. We can talk about that. But epideictic argument is argument about celebration or about public judgment. So this is the kind of speech, we're about to hear a bunch of them here in the United States. 4th of July is coming in just a few days, right? So we're about to hear a bunch of like politicians really going out on a limb and saying things like July 4th, 1776 was an important date, really taking some big risks in their public discourse there. But this is, I would say this speech is less of a deliberative speech, like you have to make a decision about this bill and contact your senator, and more of like, we won, why is that a good thing? And so Perlman and Ulbricht Stidicka, if you watch this show, you're gonna hear me reference them a lot. They're my faves. I heart them. Is that the way we say that in the internet?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, they wrote this book, and what they say is that in a typical, I put some quotes here of me kind of reading what they're saying in their text. This is not them, this is me. But what I would say, just to keep it short, is that if we think about it in terms of logic and just calculating numbers about what's better, we run into problems when we have public argument, because then we come up, public values influence what we see as better or worse information. So when you put two public values side by side, it's a real kind of, it becomes a roulette table. So what rhetors do is they will take opportunities to play the long game and bolster the values that they think are important in speeches like this, where they say, now, why is it a good thing that this bill was defeated? Why is it a good thing that this bill was passed? And on the Senate floor speech is the perfect place to do this, because Ted Cruz is speaking with his full ethos, his full credibility as a senator on the Senate floor, talking about the values of his party and the values of his side of the legislation. So what epideictic argument is saying, these are our values, and here are why our values are superior, to stock the pantry for a future argument on policy. So this is why Ted Cruz shouldn't be underestimated. He's stocking, he's replenishing the kitchen. I talk a lot in food metaphors too. So if you think about it like Chopped, Ted Cruz is stocking the kitchen for his side of the competition here to say, why are Republican values superior? The weakness of that is that he's light on some of the information, particularly about the changes to voting laws in southern states, which is the first part of the speech. That's the weakest part. So I'll leave it at that and surrender the screen back to you and have, I guess, Adriel's next.
Yeah, Adriel, what did you make any further observations after that initial impression?
I mean, I didn't look into it prior to this. So I didn't look into any of the specifics. So apart from my initial gut reactions of sort of hearing it through the lens of politicians talking, not really anything specific to note.
Okay. So when I was kind of digging into this, doing a little prep for the meeting, I started looking into, he talks about millions of convicted felons, that the act was designed to register millions of convicted felons as part of it. And he also mentions the illegal aliens, but the convicted felons piece, of course, is actually technically true. There are some states that that you're not allowed to vote if you're ever convicted. Now, there's some people were commenting that he keeps saying all felons, and technically it's not all, but he means all types of felons. So that's kind of interesting to talk about how he phrased that, and people are nitpicking on the details, because if you're still incarcerated, at the point you're incarcerated, you can't vote according to this, or it doesn't give you special rights to. So that was interesting to see that, I had such a negative reaction, but technically it's true. We could talk more about the whole illegal aliens situation, because the way it's phrased there is a bit misleading. And the other thing that kind of triggered me is that he's characterizing the motives of the Democrats. And I don't know if they would agree with that characterization. I don't know if that's really helpful in public discourse to do that. But then once again, just like Steve was saying, this is a speech of celebration and kind of a rah-rah speech. So he's not there to back up his statements, but to kind of talk about it. But those were some things that I kind of found interesting in my research on it. Steve, did you have something you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of thinking about it. The felons part is, a lot of the things he says are true. He's just saying them in less direct ways than the fact-checked discourse would like us to. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times fact check to me seems like, well, you could have worded it better, is kind of the way fact check goes. And that's unfortunate, because I think that sometimes, I'll go out on a limb and say it, people get mad at me, but I think sometimes that adds to misinformation rather than solves it. It's like, well, you're not speaking correctly. It's like grammar police equivalency. But I think that there's a kind of an artistry that Ted Cruz is doing here to also prop up his public persona. So one of the things to think about, if you want to think about, I may be jumping ahead here, so maybe I'll say that later. Let me share my second screen here, and see what else we can say. So there are three things. If you go and look at the speech in the congressional record and you look at it epidictically, you think of it as first a speech on the Senate floor. So who is this for? Like, a Senate floor speech is very difficult to nail the audience. It's way too simple to say this is for other senators. It's probably an empty room. Yeah. We know Kristen Gillibrand is there because she gets up and speaks next about a completely different issue. Doesn't even acknowledge that Ted Cruz spoke. So this is not Senate debate, right? This is just housekeeping. So it's probably an empty chamber. There's the three senators who want to get their remarks in. And then secondly, it's like, think about how different it would be if he was in an election year and giving a stump speech, and how different it would be if he was in a debate with his opponent, and think about how different it would be if he was talking to a journalist, or think about how incredibly different it would be if he was talking to a Democrat, if he was debating with, Chuck Schumer or any Democrat. How different would the words be? And then you can see how this is very well crafted. So there's three things you can look for in there that I identified as things that he's celebrating. We're celebrating the defeat because it's against our democratic values, which is probably the biggest circle you could draw. Our social values, which is a little bit more, a little smaller. And then electoral values, which is very small, like how should elections be run? So I thought of those as concentric circles of where the attention was for the reasons. That's the way I kind of thought about it in my head. And in all of those, he makes connections to why the Republicans are on top on each one. So, for example, on the social values with the felons that Bentley just talked about, he's talking more about the Republican values of like, if you are a bad person, like, you need to be punished. This is part of your appropriate punishment. These people do not deserve to vote. But it's also our electoral values that only good people should vote. Only the right kinds of people should vote. And I thought that stuck out a bit. The electoral values was the most interesting one because he talked about the Federal Election Commission being a bipartisan, in the rules of bipartisan administration that the Nixon administration set up, and how the Democrats are trying to change it to make it whatever party's in power. And then he says, imagine what that would do in these close races we have. Would you want that if the things were flipped around, if you had a Republican president and Republican leadership? Well, we had that not too long ago, and we didn't propose anything like that. So we're more in favor of fairer elections than you are. So it's kind of an interesting twist to that. So I say, if you're at home and you're thinking about it, you can go look up the speech in the congressional record and try to categorize it on these three things, and some interesting things will pop up.
Yeah, awesome. And we'll link the official record in the notes. So unless someone else stop me if you want to, but I was thinking we'd go ahead and take a look at some of the responses that people had and see kind of what we think about that. And then after that, we can kind of go into our suggestions on, on improving both the responses and his statements. So the top liked tweet when I was looking at the response was interesting that so many people hearted this. How do you register an illegal alien? How do you register a convicted felon? I'd love to hear how this would be done without violating existing law in all 50 states. It's interesting that so many people liked that when I see a lot of problems with it, and maybe because it's the same question they had, and they're all questions that that Senator Cruz doesn't go into that. And one of the things I kind of wish is that when people are putting something out there that they know is controversial, my preference would be cite your sources and tell us why, or link to it. I know a tweet doesn't have the space, but it'd be nice to say, and here's my blog post that explains why I think these things are true. Now, that may not be useful, like Steve was saying, that if this is a celebratory speech, and he may also not win any hearts and minds by doing that, but that's what I would like to see. This person seems to think that it is violating existing law in all 50 states, when it turns out some 19 states, if you're a felon, once you get out of prison, you're allowed to vote again. Which, it's interesting that a lot of people don't know that. And the whole registering illegal alien, I guess we could dig into that in a bit. That goes really, really deep. Any thoughts on that comment or any other responses that y'all want to bring up?
I mean, the first thing that jumps out to me about that response is the phrase existing law. Is everybody talking about a new law that this is in correlation to? So they're talking about changing the law. Why are you talking about the existing law if they're talking about what this new law would do to affect it? That just seems inherently dishonest or misinformed.
Exactly.
Yeah, and also that the whole point of, the idea of federal law is, in general, you don't make a federal law unless you're choosing to supersede state law, right?
Right.
Unless you're just handling interstate stuff. Well, and that's still kind of superseding. Yeah, that's interesting as well.
Yeah, I think the thing about arguing on Twitter is it's kind of like, a lot of people have talked about debate and argument as a game and theorizing it as a game. Game theorists, rhetoricians have done it, other people. When I look at arguing on Twitter, the only game I think of is Battleship, which is a very simple kind of game. So this tweet is like a Battleship argument tweet where he's like E2 and the internet was like hit. And then they're like, yeah.
Right.
So it's very much like Battleship is not chess. That's not a controversial statement. So this is a argument that I mean, first of all, is this an argument? I think it is. Yeah, but it has to be done in the contingency of Twitter. It's a battleship argument. And so it's beautiful. But in terms of forwarding public discourse, using argumentation as a reason-giving enterprise to better everyone, fails miserably. Absolutely fails.
It's amazing that it was so popular.
Oh yeah, so I mean, I would have liked it. I would have liked it too. I'll be honest, because
one of those 148 is.
Yeah, I might go click it after the show and make it 149 because it is really kind of nicely done. But I mean, Adriel's absolutely right. It's like, it's a Senate floor speech. He's not just, he's not claiming the way the media would talk about it sometimes is the claiming that the law is being broken, like the Fox News, like Democrats are violating the law. And maybe maybe Gigante read it that way. But this is Ted Cruz saying, I'm glad this law didn't pass because this law would have created all these horrible problems in our democratic and electoral values. And that's the important. So if you want to attack Ted Cruz, attack him there and be like, no, our electoral values are this. And our social values are this, right? That's the I'm getting ahead of myself again. Sorry.
Oh, that's cool. I'll just jump to another one unless someone wants to bring up. This is one I found interesting because he did go. So this is going further into detail. Now, I guess this one has 883 likes. It wasn't a direct reply. This was a quote tweet. So this one actually ended up being more popular than the one I said was the most popular. So apparently that was inaccurate, but it doesn't show up underneath it in the replies because he did a quote tweet. Anyway, so this one's fairly popular. Large difference between what Cruz keeps saying this time, that the bill mandates that all felons should be allowed to vote, and the bill's explicit language exempting felons who are in prison at the time of the election. So that's interesting. Although what's interesting is when I read this, it actually strengthens Ted Cruz's point. Because in my mind, because they're pointing out kind of a typo in what he said. He said all felons when he meant to say either, or he should have more technically said all ex-felons, which depending on how you use English, that may not be a valid term. But the implication is felons outside of prison, and or just all types of felons, because then in the speech he goes into sex offender. He just lists off the kind of the worst people that you would prefer not to be voting, just emotionally. So it was interesting that this was a popular tweet and it did all that, but I think it actually strengthened his Ted Cruz rather than dismantling it. I don't know if y'all have any impressions from that tweet.
Yeah, this is interesting because this is kind of a standard sort of internet response, is to go look and be like, here's how the guy I hate is wrong. But they don't think about the long game of that. They're like, look how he screwed it up. But again, I mean, this is the perfect example of what I was talking about how fact checking becomes like grammar police. Because if you ask yourself the question, how does this help me decide my view on whether Ted Cruz is speaking well or not, or whether he's right or not? It really doesn't. I think it probably leans your way, Bentley. But it actually makes Ted Cruz Ted Cruz is speaking about values, not about whether the law should be passed or not. And this guy totally missed it. But that's because, Ted Cruz is trained in the same dark blood magic I am, debate and rhetoric. So it's obvious for me, but for a lot of people, they're just looking at facts and at what's on the record. And, Ted Cruz, he kind of knows how to frame things to where this kind of blows right by.
Yeah. There's one other thought on that. Yeah. And actually, and he was also, I didn't catch it the first time I read it. He's quoting what he said in the speech and not what the tweet said, because he didn't say all in the tweet.
But. Right. So this guy's thesis is Ted Cruz is a liar. Ted Cruz's thesis is Republican values are superior American values. Republican values are the American values is Ted Cruz's thesis. If this thesis is Ted Cruz is a liar, I don't understand how, if I accepted and said 100% Ted Cruz is a liar, how that would have any impact on whether Republican values are American values.
Yeah, it's interesting because, some people see that once someone's a liar, they feel like they can discount everything that person says.
Right, yeah, falsum in omnibus, as they teach in law school.
Right. So but first of all, that's kind of a logical fallacy. Just because someone's right, a broken
just
clock
a little
is right.
bit, yeah.
A broken clock is right twice a day, so you can't just discount someone just because they're usually wrong. I mean, it saves time, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's not a reason to dismiss somebody. So yeah, it's interesting that this was also a very popular tweet, but what doesn't seem to be an effective tweet if what you're trying to get at is to counteract. Well, I mean, it is doing good job, I think, of emotionally counteracting it, but only really for the people that already agree with him. It's
right.
This is one of those things where it's divisive. If you agree with Ted Cruz, it's going to make you like Ted Cruz more and hate liberals more. And if you agree with liberals, this type of tweet is going to make you like this Daniel Dale better and hate Ted Cruz more. And it to me, it's kind of escalating the situation rather than de-escalating. Now, sometimes you want to escalate a situation. I prefer not to. I think we're escalated enough. So we could debate that. But I think that's kind of the result of this type of tweet.
Yeah. I will say, I think this kind of a response is useful in not in a debate response where you would get a point for it, but more in one of the first steps in this sort of a diagnosis should be pulling apart all the words and figuring out what did this person truly mean and coming to and agreed upon that. So there is that useful part of a conversation where I'm saying, okay, this statement, all the statements from all the newspapers and politicians, they're going to be grandiose, right? They're going to be meant to get attention. And so having that first layer of what do we all think they actually meant, and how many people truly thinks that thought that he meant 100% of felons active and former? How many people thought that? And then you might have some splitting out, saying, okay, well, here's where the math breaks down. So here's sort of a more boring reframe of that statement with as minimal term for interpretation as possible, and then go into the actual debate on what's left, on the actual meat and bones of the different points, and not that, well, you said all, and here's where that's wrong, so your whole argument falls apart, as opposed to you were just making it interesting to listen to.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with that. It's funny, it raises the larger question, what's the role of a mistake in an argument? Does it end the argument and make sure you win, or does it clarify the arguments that you can learn something?
Yeah, and do you sometimes end up moving the goalposts because everyone realizes they had different goalposts in their mind than what they were saying, or they misinterpreted. And for people that aren't familiar with that analogy, the goalpost being the target you're aiming for when you're having a debate. Sometimes you move them, and that's considered a bad thing to do, but sometimes it's necessary.
Yeah.
We may not be able to get to all four of these, but go ahead.
I was just going to say, when it comes to debate, I like to think of it in terms of less who's more right and more in terms of who's less wrong. Who's sort of has those, which even still isn't a perfect way to think about it, but knowing that it's almost certain that if you pick apart the entire argument, that's going to be a very precise thing where it's almost impossible to be 100% on every single thing that I say and I'm going to argue is going to be correct. And so it just comes down to, well, what do we know? And yeah, I think as Steve said, that was a good way to frame it is, what does a mistake mean? Well, in theory, if you identify it, it means you're one step closer to knowing what the truth is. And if you're only approaching it through the lens of, so I'm right, as opposed to now we know what's right, I think that one is constructive and one's not.
This is almost a meta argument. It's not actually talking about the crux of the matter. It's talking about the debate and the debater. So that's also kind of an interesting way to think about it. If I could jump ahead to the next one. So this tweet from Shannon Davis just says, no, it won't. Well, not just, it also quotes a factcheck.org about misinformation for the House approval of HR 1. What do y'all think of that one?
I mean, that's both useless and also the perfect epitome of what modern discourse actually is, which you don't have to actually say anything useful. You just have to say it louder and more. And then somehow that means that your side wins.
Sorry, I lost track of it.
I'd like to send my congratulations to factcheck.org for being treated as if it was a fact itself. Because this is like, just like Adriel's saying, the move is to say, look at the facts, which is what this tweet is that verbal move of like, go do your own research. I don't have time to educate you, which you see a lot in comment threads. Go do your own research. I've done my own research. Go do your own research. I don't have time to argue with an idiot. And this is kind of the way this goes. Now I wonder if that's effective or not. That's definitely popular, but I wonder if that's something that is something we want to say should be, like we talk about the normative. Should that be the way it's done or not? But I mean, people treat factcheck.org as if it were true and not an interpretation of information, which is what a fact check is.
True. I mean, to be fair, I think people treat any article that agrees with what they think as a fact.
Yeah, absolutely.
Step one, does it agree with me?
Even worse than I
Step
thought.
two, it must be correct.
Yeah, and yeah, I think factcheck.org over the years, rightfully or wrongly, the conservatives it's not a trusted source for conservatives. And we could talk in depth on whether that's true or not. We probably will in the future. I do like the fact that this person did do, like, I like anything where you're pointing to a deeper resource, right? Because then it's not just you spouting an opinion. I have context for what you're thinking. And this article does address some of the things that he said in the tweet and in the speech, and does counteract them. But it is, to Steve's point, it's a bit of, I have to go in there and I have to find the right section to kind of figure it out. And that's a fair amount of work for someone who's already scrolling, doom scrolling through Twitter. It'd be nice if these, and this is kind of what some of the tools for me and Adriel and other groups are doing, is to where you could link directly to the specific point within this misinformation article that counters that one, to kind of reduce that cognitive load on the person. And then a new tool in browsers that I thought I'd just mention up is now you can link to text within an article. And when people click on that link, it will highlight that text. It'll scroll to it and highlight it. So that'll be useful in future discussions. So this is better than some of the other ones where they were just witty. And actually, I don't think I have one in here. I meant to put, there were like 50 of them that just said lying Ted. I forgot to put one in here for that. So I don't know. What do y'all think of just a single, maybe we covered that when we talked about her saying no, it won't, but what do y'all think about just saying, using a moniker that actually came from Trump, a dismissive tweet?
I think it goes to something that I think both of you touched on, which who is that talking to? That's talking to people that already agree with you, and you're just trying to get likes and retweets from people that already agree with you, ultimately not meaningful at all.
Yeah, it's the difference between a sniper rifle and a pipe bomb. Lion Ted is a rhetorical pipe bomb. It has no discrimination in who it hits and where it causes the damage. And I think people like that kind of thing because they like to create that kind of explosive phrase. Trump, I don't know what you think about him, but one thing he did make great again is ad hominems. They really got controversial because, I mean, I study this stuff and I love like Little Marco and low energy Ted. Low energy Jeb was my favorite one. I love all these little diminutive ad homs.
He was pretty good at that.
Yeah. But the question of whether or not that advances public discourse is pretty clear. But the interesting ways it changes public discourse are going to be with us for a generation at least, as we can see with how many Lion Teds we had.
Yeah. Actually, it's funny. I couldn't find any in my quick scroll, so maybe I was lying. I remember seeing several.
No, I saw it too. Okay. On the original thread. You're not going crazy, not yet anyway.
Maybe Twitter pulled them all out because it was not fact checked. But yeah, like here's another one: total nonsense, fear tactics. That is just that, just an opinion, an emotional response, which I hope people feel better.
Miss.
I think going back to the battleship analogy, that's perfect, especially if you think that every person has a different board, right? So you say before 95% of people won't have a ship there and it won't land, and then the 5% that do, they're like, yeah, that was awesome. I find the same
totally
thing
meant to do that.
When I watch the so-and-so owns so-and-so videos on YouTube, you watch it And 9 times out of 10, it's just they make a point that their side agrees with. And so they're like, oh, I destroyed them. Not really. If you don't believe that point, it's not backed up at all. And it's just more fuel for the echo chamber.
Okay, yep. So I like that analogy, but I'm going to change the game. It's bingo. Because you can call out before. It works the same way.
Yeah.
But that's not on everyone's card.
Yeah.
It doesn't make a line on everyone's card. Anyways, I'm sorry.
No, it's true. It's true.
I'm very happy with myself.
That's a great one. I'm gonna steal that actually.
Yeah. Debate bingo.
And I guess I just put this one in here because it's another fact check. Now this one gets a little bit more detailed in the response. All the crew's claims are false, which is interesting because I think if you read that article, his claim about millions I think it's factually accurate to say millions of felons will be registered more than in the past if this bill passes. So once again, I'm being the little truth police, grammar police on this person. So maybe that's not helpful, like Steve was saying. There's no basis for, sorry. I'm playing with my toys and I completely lost it.
I mean, I would love to see stats, like if we had a really good library of all of these breakdowns to figure out how often are statements with the word all demonstrably false, which I would probably guess in a realm of 95% plus, if we're like being pedantic about it, if we're like getting,
I don't think it's pedantic at all. I mean, I think it's just being careful with your words, but if you think words are a vehicle for truth, you're not going to be very careful with them. This is why, I used to do media all the time here in New York, but journalists got tired of me because they'd be like, "Professor, who won the debate?" And be like, "Well, from one point of view, it could be said that maybe, perhaps nobody won, but maybe we could take a step back and say that winning's not the way to look at it." And they're like, "Yeah, that's all fine and good, but who won?"
I need a headline, Steve. What do I put for the headline?
Yeah. So that's why you hardly ever see faculty on news anymore. It's better to have an expert person, a journalist, or an ex-political contributor, because they kind of know what to do. And faculty, we don't know what to do.
So your problem, Steve, is that you're too nuanced.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right.
That's what they say.
There is nuance to journalism out there, but you're not going to find it in the places everybody looks every day.
Right.
That's for sure.
And another observation on this one is, to Adriel's point about all and stuff like that, it's interesting because it's a stronger emotional argument, but it's a weaker rational or logical argument. Because anytime you say all, if they can find one example and technically that argument is proven false. Although most of the time in real discussions, we really know that when they say all, they don't literally mean all. There's always the one exception that proves the rule. And stuff like that. Well, we're running short on time, and I didn't get into the whole aliens thing, which is good because we probably don't have time to go into why his statement on alien. And the goal of this podcast isn't actually to do fact checks, but it was an interesting thing. If people are interested, I suggest you do your own research and look at some of the fact checking articles. Actually, the ones linked in here, and we'll link some in the bottom, on what they say about aliens, and then think of aliens being registered vote, and then think about why Ted would still, Senator Cruz, I should say. I don't know him personally, although he is my representative, so maybe I should be able to call him Ted.
Yeah, let's get him on the show.
That's right. I'm sure he'd be happy to come on. So anyways, so we won't get into that, but that's probably a can of worms that we really couldn't get into. But let's just say that it's an interesting back and forth, and he's not obviously right, but he's also not obviously wrong, in my limited opinion. So let's get to the winning part of the Winning Arguments podcast, which we don't know if that's the name yet. Would y'all, does anyone want to propose a rephrasing of this tweet or something he said in the argument that we think would be better? And it could be better for any audience, or we could talk about some unexpected negative, getting around some unexpected negative consequences of this tweet, in proposing a better way to do it. What do you think?
Yeah, I have a suggestion a modest suggestion for the senator from Texas, if I'm phrasing it correctly. let me see what I can do. I'm going to bring up a quote here from the speech itself, probably exactly on what Bentley was just talking about. So it's, I mean, we didn't do as much show prep as it appears we did. But let me bring this up to where everyone can see. This is in the middle of the speech, and this is the part that we were just talking about the illegals and stuff. So the blue highlighted text is what I want to talk about. So he says it mandates that all felons should be allowed to vote, murderers, rapists, child molesters, all to vote, because Democrats have made the cynical calculation that millions of illegal aliens are allowed to vote and millions of criminals and felons are allowed to vote. Those individuals are likely to vote Democrat, and Democrats want to stay in power. I think this could be better if he said that, if he changed it to where the scope of the impact of this is that if you have violated society in an abhorrent way and shown your disregard for other human beings, you should not have the privilege of voting. Voting is reserved for people who respect the laws of the United States and abide by the things that make our communities the most enviable on the planet. Instead of making it a cynical democratic political calculation, he could have gotten a lot more power out of it by saying this is against all American values, not just democratic. And that's the change I would say that this speech really needs, is that we don't need foreigners influencing our elections. The Democrats just had a huge investigation and an impeachment, 2 impeachments about this. And we also don't want people who violated basic human decency to have any say in who runs this country. And that's the way I would have phrased it if I was speech writing for him. I would have left this this democratic cynicism out.
Yeah, awesome. Hey, Joe, you got any opinions on?
I mean, I think overall for what his goals were, I think he did it perfectly. I think it was sort of big enough to soak up his base. It had enough sort of issues with it that people were going to attack him and get, the conversation started. So, it's going to be all over both cable news channels, and it's going to get people talking about it and put his face on TV yet again. Like probably everything that he hoped was going to happen here happened.
Yes.
If we go back to the text, the one thing that I find interesting is that he talks about the convicted murderers, rapists, sexual predators, etc., and then just seamlessly goes into talking about, so if illegal aliens are allowed to vote, which to me sort of has this subtle link between the two. He goes, he lists crimes and then says, so based on that, if illegal aliens or convicted felons, which like, well, what does the first group have to do with any of what you've said so far? But that might just be sort of trying to wrap it up in a cohesive argument, but also leaves that seed of, that's an interesting tie-in, that even though nothing else that you said applies to that topic, you just thought that you'd include that.
So Adriel, yes, he met his goals. What if his goal was also to not be divisive, or if his goal was to...
I don't think he'd be elected.
That's a valid...
I don't think that we know his name. If he didn't want to be divisive and didn't want to go 100% behind the Republican platform.
The interesting thing is, I think one of the changes in the technology that you and I are building is that we want to try to change the incentive structure, so that people can get elected, being more nuanced and speaking a little bit less divisively. Right. So we're not there yet.
Right, because we're just measuring for charisma now. That's the only thing that we're really measuring for. Which, I would love to see the NFL, if it chose it people just based on charisma. That would be a hilarious spectacle.
Yeah, it's always kind of mixed up together, isn't it? Because there's players who are really excellent that people despise, and then there are players that people love who are just terrible, like Andrew Luck, right? He was like not doing so well, but people just love that guy. And then there's Tom Brady, who everybody hates, but you can't deny that he's good. So it's all, the idea of charisma is all wrapped up in this question of identity, and also something that we didn't really get into that Bentley mentioned at the beginning of the show, motives. Mm-hmm. And so, maybe what we're looking for is a way, instead of just talking about the facts, we should talk about motives and facts as kind of inexorably mixed together. Like, what would be Ted Cruz's motives for, in the same breath, saying murderers, rapists, child molesters, illegal aliens in the same sentence, like 5 words away from each other?
Right.
It doesn't take a brilliant person to guess what the motives are.
Yeah, I think it's also important when you're like talking about a certain person, it's really easy to misspeak. And so if they do it once or twice, it's reasonable to say like, well, here's the other 80 times he talked about that and didn't conflate those two. So if you do it once or twice, it's not so bad. Part of it is spotting trends and saying like, hey, he does it almost every time, or he does it like 10% of the time. And then also when you're looking at something like a piece of legislation, there's usually a bunch of sort of hidden discussion around, okay, when they were actually talking about the legislation, which individual pieces did certain Republicans say, yes or no, or let's change it to this? Because it's going to be very difficult if you vote for for or against a certain piece of legislation to make any definitive learnings from that, because a lot of times it's like, oh, that's too expensive, or that's, I don't like all the extra pork in that bill. At the very least, to record it so we can start to spot trends. And so you can say, okay, in this conversation around the Corrupt Politicians Act, which is this specific piece of legislation, here's the exact text, here's what went into the discussion, here's what was added, here's what was removed, and figure out what has Ted done in regard to that piece of legislation. What did he say while it was being crafted? What did he say, for or against? What did he try to add? So that this kind of a statement becomes, you can sort of look at the overall scope of, oh, okay, when they were adding that part about illegal aliens, he asked to add this amendment, which maybe goes to show either, he's like, oh, he actually is trying to solve that, or not so much. You can start to see those trends, and I guess that's.
So what I would have liked to see in this is I would like to kind of actually avoid the discussion on motives, unless it's shared motives, and putting motives on other people and talk about other people's motives. And that'll be an interesting discussion that we'll have as we kind of go through these things, or whether that's a useful kind of line to draw or not. I would have also liked to see him linked to something where we could get more info on why he thinks that, because when I'm doing my internet research, I'm finding all the fact checking organizations and stuff where they talk about where he's wrong, and they go down to a certain level. But then I had to interpret, well, this is the way I think Ted would respond to that fact check. But because I don't have, because it's hard for me to get to where he kind of talks about it. And he also may choose not to talk all the way down to the level that I would like to see the debate go to, that level of depth. Now, whether he would still be an elected official if he did that, I mean, hopefully one of the things we do is build a world where you wouldn't be elected if you had to speak in this way. But we'll see if we ever get there. So that's kind of what I'd like to see. And we didn't even talk about renaming the bill the Corrupt Politicians Act, which would be a big discussion. So we'll have to do that. We'll have to do that at another time. And I was curious whether he did that. He's done that more since Trump, because that was one thing that Trump really showed real well. And if he is doing that now because of that, he's adapted that technique well, which a lot of Trump's techniques people haven't been able to adapt. But he may have also been doing that beforehand. I'm not sure who to give credit there.
Yeah, if he's the one that came up with it, I'm interested that he chose that phrase.
No, I mean,
just because it seems weird to stand against the Corrupt Politicians Act. Right. Like, true. Not that acts mean anything to do with, like, the Citizens United Act has nothing to do with the name suggests. But you'd think that you'd pick a different name that didn't sound like you were, coming out against the Corrupt Politicians Act. That's funny.
Yeah. But before we go, is there anything going on in this space of discussion and public discourse that anyone wants to bring up and share, or plug your own things? Steve?
Yes, I would. How nice of you to mention. So I have a book chapter in this book coming out. It's my first foray to publishing about video games. So this book is out just today from McFarland Press. Being Dragonborn, it's a collection of essays by scholars from all different fields about the video game Skyrim. And you can look at the table of contents here and see, where is my, let's see, I might be in part 4, I don't know. I'm in here somewhere. I can't see myself right now, but anyway, it shows you all the different chapters. Oh, here we are. So this is me. And yeah, buy the book, take a look at it, see what you think. Video game studies, very cool. McFarlane has a whole series of them. So that's my plug.
Awesome. Hey, Joe, do you have anything that you want to share or talk about?
I guess it sounds like you and I might be having an upcoming session on trying to create portable projects. This would, I guess, this directly relates to one of my challenges, and I assume other challenges of people that are trying to solve issues like I'm trying to solve, which is you aren't a developer and you need a developer to help solve problems. And I think a lot of those projects fall apart when you work with one developer and that person has to leave, then the project dies because no one knows how to take it over. So having one or more live streams and sort of trying to create a template for what does it look like to approach development work from that angle, knowing that you're going to have to go through a whole bunch of different developer hands and making sure that you take sort of the extra time to document it and how you structure work and milestones and that sort of thing. So
yeah, so we work together on building products, online tools to help people with understanding of what's going on in the public sphere and making better decisions. So yeah, some of the tips and tricks on how to do that technology. So we'll put a link to that in the comments. And then the thing I'm currently working on, said founder of Gullybot, which is just an experiment. Y'all are seeing Gullybot there, right? I'm not sure I got the right screen.
Yep,
just
I'm seeing it.
Just an experiment, so it may not be fully fledged out. Don't expect high quality. But right now we're working on the COVID-19 vaccine. So if you're interested, go to gullibot.com and see what Gully has to say, and you can explore and see all the reasons why Gully's kind of made that decision. And the great thing about Gullybot is that you can tweet Gullybot and Gullybot will change its mind because it is gullible. So it's kind of a character to have a public discourse on complex topics. So appreciate any feedback for that. Great. All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for putting it together.
Thanks all.
Oh, actually, I don't want to stop the recording yet.
Yeah, that was a good move.
We'll keep recording, but like, I'll cut it there.
Yeah, it's good that was your natural impulse because that means it felt like a real show.
Right. Yeah. Right. Awesome. So now we're way over time. So if anyone needs to go, just let me know.
I'm okay.
I can maybe do a couple more minutes, but I should go at some point.
Yeah. Am I still sharing? No, I'm not. Okay, good.
No, you're not sharing.
Yeah. So also, if you have any thoughts about the show and you don't think of it now and want to talk later, just put them in the Slack channel. But yeah, I think it went well. I guess I do kind of like the format. I think, Steve, we could probably work on making your slides a little bit more attractive.
Yeah, I just made basic ones. I don't know what we might want it to look like. I can put black in there, make it look more consistent, or
yeah. It was a bit challenging because Adriel wanted to have you pull it back up, but I didn't have a control, and the whole switching control back and forth. And I don't know if there's times that y'all would like to be able to highlight something on my screen with the share tool up. There is, I think, a way for you to draw on my screen. So if you wanted to highlight some text, you could do that. But if you have to write something like Steve, if you wanted to label the premise or or one of the warrant, right? That's something we might want to work on as just a technical.
That'd be kind of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I don't have any other observations right now. I am a bit tired. Although it's interesting that we can't, we're probably only gonna get talk about the main thing and one or two responses.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe we took on too much but I did I immediately disagree with that because the play between us was so nice.
Good.
Like it felt very constructive. And I think watching it or listening to it again, you might feel the value added by our interaction and what we're looking at to the listener. So I think that was good.
And technically,
and then just let me know. Yeah, let me know what things I can do to make my slides look better. Because I mean, I'm always presenting slides to a captive audience. They don't ever, even if they complain, it doesn't matter. This is what they're going to get. So
Right. Yeah.
I don't have a commercial audience.
Yeah. Well, I might play with it and see if I have any suggestions. Plus, you know,
Yeah,
if
we can come up with our own
if the show
template,
gets
too.
popular, we'll work on a design, and then we'll probably have
Yeah.
a standard set of slides.
Yeah, that's what I would like to. I'd like that.
But only if people actually want to watch it.
Yep,
But
right.
I thought it was good. I think I'm gonna share it around and see. So I'll do one where it's the full thing for people that want to see the behind the scenes, and then I'll do an edit that takes off the front and end, and maybe a few, if I have times in the middle where we're kind of flubbing around. But yeah, I think that's great. I don't have anything else. I'm sure I'll say some other things in the Slack channel, but
yeah, this was a good one. I kind of want to do stuff like this for the first few till we get our legs, because it's kind of nice to have this kind of a more traditional kind of public argument. So stuff like this, I really like. At first, I was like, Ted Cruz, I don't know, but it's pretty rich. It's a lot to say.
Yeah, it was even better than I kind of thought when I just first threw it out. Of course, I thought he was just completely lying, and my thing was going to be, how can someone say this in a Senate and not be kicked out for lying to the American people? And then I'm like, oh, he didn't technically lie.
And I think that's something politicians are really good at, right? Is figuring out, like, as long as it's 25% true, I can stand behind it, because then they'll corner me, and I can point to all the things that are true, and everything else is just nuanced conversation. Yeah. And I find like, as much as I don't like a lot of what politicians do, they've crafted it to work, to get attention and to drive that sort of, to get people to vote.
Yeah, on the Senate floor, you can't be held accountable for anything you say. It's completely protected as a senator. Right? If anything you say is totally fine. In the House, it's a little different, but the Senate has a lot of liberty.
And it's good that they kind of have a bit of freedom of speech. So.
Oh yeah, they have like ultimate kind of. In fact, even if they commit a crime, if they're on the way to the Senate, they can't be arrested. The police have to wait until the meeting's over, and then they can arrest them.
Oh, that's funny. It's only reading for the filibuster.
Yeah, there you go. They're like, I'm just going to filibuster my way. What's the statute of limitations on this crime? That's the length of the filibuster. Here we go.
Yeah. All right, guys. Keep chatting in the Slack channel.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys.
Wow.
Bye-bye.